Undercover owners once visited a diner and noticed a waitress working with a broken hand. Denise Carter moved through her shift with one arm bandaged, balancing trays and pushing past the pain, while her manager, Ross, criticized her for every small mistake. Customers murmured among themselves, some feeling sorry for her, others quietly judging Ross's harshness. What no one knew was that her injury had been an accident, and Ross was concealing something far more troubling. From a corner booth, Harold, the undercover owner, watched closely. Something about the situation didn't sit right. The deeper he looked into it, the more unsettling truths surfaced. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, please consider subscribing. Your support truly helps us continue sharing powerful real-life stories. Stay with us until the end. And if this story moves you, let us know your thoughts in the comments and share it with someone you care about. Now, let's begin. The diner carried the faint smell of burnt coffee and fried bacon that seemed permanent. During the morning rush, the counter was alive with chatter, the hiss of the grill, and the clatter of stacked plates. In the middle of it all was Denise Carter. She didn't stand out because she sought attention, but because she worked with relentless focus, doing the job of several people at once. Her hair was tied back, her apron already marked with stains. With her good hand, she served steaming cups of coffee while balancing plates against her hip. Her left hand, however, was wrapped tightly in bandages that ran up to her wrist. Anyone watching closely could see her stiff movements and the slight flinch whenever she brushed against something. Still, Denise kept smiling. That was her way of coping. Behind the counter, Ross leaned against the register, smirking as he barked out orders. "Move faster, Denise. Don't make them wait. This isn't a charity." His voice cut through the noise of the diner, sharp, loud enough for customers to hear. A few patrons looked up, shaking their heads. At table 3, 2 women in business suits whispered to each other. "Poor thing. Look at her hand. She shouldn't even be working." "Yeah, but Ross never eases up. He's always on her case. I don't know how she does it." Denise heard every word. She heard the laughter, the pity, and the scolding remarks from Ross. Each time she slowed down, she braced herself. But quitting wasn't an option. Rent didn't wait. Bills didn't stop. By mid-morning, sweat had gathered on the back of her neck, and her good arm throbbed from the strain of carrying everything alone. She dropped off an order at table 6 with a polite, "Enjoy your meal," then turned, only to bump straight into Ross. The collision spilled a glass of water down his shirt. The diner went silent. Ross leaned close enough for her to smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Clumsy again? Looking for excuses now?" he hissed. A few customers shifted uneasily. Someone muttered, "Man, give her a break." But Ross ignored them, staring at Denise with a cold satisfaction. She muttered an apology and reached for a towel with her good hand. But he snatched it away. His lips curved into a grin only she could see. The kind that made it clear this wasn't about the spilled water. It was about control. And the worst part? She understood exactly why. A few weeks earlier, Denise had overheard Ross bragging about taking money from the register. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She was just cleaning tables after closing when his voice carried through the thin office door. At first, she thought she'd misheard. But when she leaned closer, every word confirmed the truth. Ross was stealing. When he found her standing outside the office that night, frozen in shock, she remembered the fury in his eyes and how his hand grabbed her wrist until something cracked. The pain had sent her to her knees, but Ross only sneered. "Clumsy, huh? Keep it that way. Say one word about what you heard, and you won't just lose your job." Now, with her injured hand wrapped and nearly useless, she was the one being labeled as incapable. By the end of her shift, Denise was trembling from fatigue. She leaned against the back counter, quietly whispering a prayer that no one else could hear. She didn't realize that someone had been observing her all along. Someone she assumed was just another customer grabbing a quick, cheap meal. That silent watcher was about to change everything. Most customers came and went without much notice, eating their pancakes, tipping if they felt like it, and hurrying back to their busy lives. But one man never seemed to rush. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with neatly trimmed white hair and worn boots that looked like they'd traveled more miles of open road than city streets. People called him the Vet because of the way he carried himself, straight-backed, composed, and alert. To most, he seemed like a retired regular passing time over a plate of eggs. What no one knew was that this man, Harold Whitman, was the true owner of the diner. For years, Harold had kept his ownership a secret, choosing to blend in with the regular customers. He believed you learned the truth about people when they thought no one important was watching. That morning, Harold stirred his coffee slowly, his attention fixed on Denise. He had been observing her for weeks, always working harder than anyone else, always the one Ross singled out. But today was different. With her hand wrapped tightly in bandages, every tray she lifted looked ready to slip, and every smile she managed seemed forced through pain. At the next booth, two young men spoke just loud enough for Harold to hear. "Man, that manager really has it out for her. Yeah, I've seen others slack off plenty, but he never says a thing to them. Just her." Harold's jaw tightened. After years of running businesses, he knew how to recognize bias and cruelty when he saw it. Ross strutted past Harold's table then, laughing at something on his phone. When Denise quietly asked for help carrying a heavy stack of dishes, Ross didn't even look her way. Instead, he muttered, "Use both hands." "Oh, wait, you can't." His laugh sliced through the diner's noise like a harsh echo. Harold didn't move. He didn't react. But inside, frustration simmered. Later, as Denise wiped down the counter, Harold noticed the faint wince in her eyes when she bent her wrist too far. He also saw how carefully she avoided Ross, like someone who had already learned that being too close brought trouble. Something clearly wasn't right. When the lunch crowd began to fade, Harold quietly asked to see the manager. Ross walked over with his usual swagger, assuming it was another minor complaint. "Food not hot enough? Coffee too strong?" he joked with a smirk. Harold shook his head. "Just wondering about that waitress. She's hurt." "Why is she still on the floor?" Ross's grin slipped for a moment before returning. "Her? She's clumsy. Always making mistakes. Half the incident reports are because of her. But she begged to keep her shift, so I let her. You know, I'm generous like that." Harold nodded slowly, though inside, every word from Ross sounded false. Generous? Hardly. He'd seen Ross's attitude firsthand. The sneers, the comments, the way customers whispered, and how Denise kept going despite the pain just to hold on to her dignity. That evening, Harold sat alone in the corner booth long after most customers had left. His coffee sat untouched and cold. He watched Denise cleaning tables with her good hand, offering polite smiles to strangers, even though exhaustion was written in her eyes. The old veteran narrowed his gaze. If Ross claimed Denise was the issue, Harold intended to find out the truth himself. And if his suspicions proved right, someone in that diner would soon regret underestimating both her and him. The next day, Harold returned to the diner. Same corner booth, same black coffee. To everyone else, he looked like the same quiet veteran with nowhere else to be. But his focus wasn't on the menu. It was on Ross. Ross strutted from table to table, cracking jokes with customers and laughing louder than anyone else. Yet the moment Denise passed by, his expression turned cold. Every move Denise made, Ross was ready to criticize. If she poured coffee too slowly, he snapped his fingers. If she wiped the counter more than once, he muttered about wasting time. Harold began to notice a clear pattern. This wasn't general management. It was deliberate targeting. When Denise accidentally dropped a single fork, Ross exaggerated the moment, shaking his head and telling a nearby table, "See what I deal with? Always careless." Customers exchanged uneasy looks, unsure whether he was serious or joking. Denise bent down to pick up the fork, her good hand trembling, her face flushed with embarrassment. By now, Harold's doubts had turned into certainty. Ross wasn't just being strict, he was setting her up. That afternoon, Harold slipped into the back office under the excuse of looking for the restroom. The door was unlocked, papers scattered across the desk. His eyes fell on a pile of misconduct reports. Page after page carried Denise's name across the top. accusing her of small errors, spilled drinks, missed orders, poor attitude. But Harold had been dining there for months and had never once seen her behave unprofessionally. As he flipped through the stack, something else caught his eye. Cash register records that didn't balance. Each week the totals dropped, yet no formal reports were filed. His chest tightened. He'd seen this before. In his years running businesses, he knew exactly what these discrepancies meant. Ross wasn't just unfair, he was stealing. That night, Harold stayed later than usual, sitting quietly with his coffee as the diner emptied. When the last customers left, Ross disappeared into the office. The door didn't close completely and voices carried into the hallway. Another $5,000. Easy, Ross bragged, his laughter echoing from inside. And when they noticed the missing cash, Ross sneered. That little waitress takes the blame. She's already got the most write-ups. No one's going to believe her over me. A second voice, one of his drinking buddies, snorted. You're taking a big risk, man. What if she talks? Ross's tone turned colder. She won't. Not with that hand. I broke it well enough to remind her who's in charge. Harold stood frozen in the shadows, his fists tightening. The air in his chest grew heavy, each breath slower. This wasn't just theft, it was abuse, cruel, deliberate, and cowardly. He thought of Denise forcing a smile through the pain, working without complaint, and something inside him hardened. The conversation ended with drunken laughter. Harold slipped out the side door into the night, the cool air brushing against his face. For the first time in years, his old instincts stirred. He had seen injustice before, but to find it in his own business, that he wouldn't allow. The truth was now clear, and by tomorrow the mask would come off. Morning came and the diner buzzed as usual. Coffee pots hissed, forks clinked, and voices rose and fell in rhythm. Denise moved from table to table, her bandaged hand pressed against her apron. To most people, she looked like any tired worker getting through another long day. But Harold saw something else. A woman carrying a burden heavier than her trays. Today, though, wasn't going to be like any other. Harold entered quietly. Same boots, same denim jacket. But this time, his posture was different. He wasn't there as a customer. He was there as the owner. Ross stood by the counter, laughing too loudly, joking with two waitresses who rolled their eyes once he turned away. The moment he noticed Harold, his grin faded. You again? Back for the eggs? Harold didn't reply. Instead, he walked to the center of the diner and tapped his spoon gently against his coffee cup. The soft metallic sound drew attention from every booth. Conversation stopped. Forks froze midair. Denise looked up, startled. Good morning, everyone, Harold began, his voice calm and steady. I think it's time you all know who I really am. Ross gave a nervous laugh. What, you writing a book or something? Harold's gaze didn't waver. No, I own this diner. Silence swept through the room. A fork clattered onto a plate. Denise's eyes widened in disbelief. For years, no one had realized the quiet man in the corner booth was the one signing their checks. Ross barked out a shaky laugh, though his face had turned pale. You're joking! Harold pulled a folder from under his jacket and placed it on the counter. Papers spilled out. Misconduct reports, financial records, register logs. I've seen enough. I know exactly what you've been doing, Ross. Every false report you filed against Denise, every dollar you took from the register, and what you did to her hand. Gasps rippled across the diner. Customers turned in their seats. The two women at the business table whispered, I knew it. He was dirty, Ross stammered. This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything. Before he could finish, two police officers entered the diner. Harold had called them earlier that morning. Their presence brought the room to complete silence. Ross's bravado collapsed. Wait, you can't. This isn't. But the sound of handcuffs cut him off. The diner filled with murmurs as the officers led him away. His protests faded under the clinking of chains. Denise stood still, her good hand pressed to her chest. For the first time, Ross wasn't hovering over her. For the first time, the blame no longer rested on her shoulders. Harold turned to her, his tone softening. You've carried this place on your back. While others lied about you, you kept it running. From today on, you're not just a waitress. You're the new floor supervisor. Denise blinked. tears gathering in her eyes. Her bandaged hand trembled as she pressed it to her lips, a quiet sob escaping. Customers clapped, some gently, others with heartfelt applause. For the first time, Denise stood tall, not as someone pitied, but as someone finally recognized for who she was. Outside, Ross's angry shouts faded as the police car drove away. Inside, the diner smelled the same, burnt coffee and fried food. But the air felt lighter, cleaner. Harold sat back at his usual booth, coffee in hand. But this time he wasn't just watching, he was smiling. Justice had finally been served. Never underestimate the quiet strength of those who keep showing up, even when the world tries to break them. Denise's story proves that truth endures, and justice always finds those who deserve it. If stories like this inspire you, make sure to hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and leave your thoughts in the comments, because your voice matters too.